What does Dead by Daylight hide off camera from the player? Dead by Daylight is a multiplayer nightmare simulator where 4 survivors must outwit a killer in order to escape. In today's video, we're going to take a look behind the scenes to see how the developers pulled off this iconic game. From off-camera aspects hidden from the player to slow-motion examinations of animations, we have a decent amount to cover. And I want to give a big thanks to the mobile version of Dead by Daylight for sponsoring this video. I was flattered when they reached out and was super excited to partner with them. As always, I like to do a quick recap of the game I'm covering prior to jumping in. In Dead by Daylight, 4 players must work together to survive the deadly pursuit of a 5th player, the killer. These survivors must repair generators scattered around all sorts of terrifying maps. If these generators are successfully repaired, the survivors can then open the gate and escape. However, it's the killer's goal to stop this from happening, and to sacrifice all the survivors. There's lots of iconic killers such as Ghostface, Michael Myers, and Freddy Krueger. Each killer has a unique skill set designed to make the survivors have a very, very bad day. And with the newly released mobile version by NetEase, now you can take this horrifying concept with you on your phone. The controls are customizable too, which means you can adapt your mobile device to what is most comfortable. So you can either run for your life like a champ, or hunt down those you're pursuing in the dark. So the first thing I want to talk about on this grand adventure of horror is the title screen. So Dead by Daylight has this very iconic title screen where we have a killer overlooking a pack of survivors. And this title screen has evolved over time, and even this same instance can be found on the mobile version. Prior to entering a game, we have the killer off to the right, and we have 4 survivors grouped together in a different format, but it still sort of matches that aesthetic. And so we're going to take one of these versions of the title screen for a spin, and as you can see, this is sort of what the map looks like. In this version, we have this sort of dark forest, and as we take the camera around, you can see how it's layered and how the trees in the back are actually lower than the ground to sort of give a sense of like a hill or perspective as you're looking outward. And of course, we have our killer over here. Any killer that we choose will be standing right here, and the survivors in the back will sort of cycle out. Now, there are some things hidden out of bounds on this map. There's like this black rectangle with this pulsating effect on the one side, and then we have this giant white rectangle that is actually a 3D model, it's not flat, just sort of floating off the side as well. But something that I always love is really cool transitions, and Dead by Daylight does this like disintegration effect on the different characters when you're cycling through them. So a character will disintegrate and then recinegrate. I think I just made that up, but basically the animation is sort of reversed. And this is a really cool like material masking function that they're doing in Unreal Engine. And watching this in slow motion up close, you can kind of appreciate how cool it looks. So here's a few different characters that is happening with, and in my opinion, it looks really cool. So moving on from the title screen, let's actually jump into a game as a killer. So in this game, they use 2 different camera setups depending on if you are a killer or if you're a survivor. The survivors get a 3rd-person perspective, which is very helpful because you can look around objects and see if the killer is sneaking up on you. And the killer gets a 1st-person perspective, which makes hunting down survivors a bit easier because I feel like your attacks are more accurate, it's easier to aim. However, we do lose out on the visibility of being in 3rd person where we can peek around corners. Now for the survivor, the camera's positioned behind them, so everything is visible. So there's no visual tricks for that camera. However, the 1st-person camera has a very neat trick they do to make sure you don't see the actual model of the character. In all 1st-person games where you can see your body, they have to do something similar, and sometimes they remove the head, sometimes they just remove the torso, and you just have arms. But Dead by Daylight actually takes the torso and the head and slides it backwards on the model. Now, of course, this looks funny from this perspective because the model is stretched out. However, it keeps the full model intact, and they simply scoop back anything that they don't want clipping through the actual camera and the player's point of view. So yeah, this looks very odd right here, but remember, from a developer's point of view, in designing this game, the 1st-person perspective is all that matters. And this technique works very well for pulling off the 1st-person animations. So now we're going to show some things that you normally cannot see with the maps themselves, or at least providing a vantage point that normally cannot be accessed. So of course, flying around a map like this lets you be able to see things that you normally can't see. And honestly, you kind of get a better appreciation for how these maps are laid out from up here. And so while we're flying around like a bird, why don't we take a look at the moon? Because the moon itself, as you probably may have guessed, is just a flat sprite. So as we fly up towards it and go around it, you'll see that it's completely flat and it is only visible from the front. Heading indoors in gas heaven, there's something quite interesting that I found that I wanted to show off. So there are these newspapers scattered around this destroyed gas station, and the headline for the paper can be read in the game, but it's actually kind of difficult. But here you can see it plain as day. It reads, "Miniature horses in Dodge County make for more than just educational story." And it's a bit hard to read even with this close-up, but it looks like this took place either on February 13th or 15th in 2006. On the same newspaper, we can find the Dead by Daylight logo in the top right, and then a photo of what appears to be Meg and a handprint. So this is quite the crazy collage of things, and it was probably just a developer having fun while making up a kind of absurd combination in this texture. But now I want to know if this story is real. So here's a few more shots flying around a map like a bird, soaring over this landscape. And speaking of birds, why don't we take a look at the birds that spawn around the map? The ones that fly away and alert the killer of your presence if you run. This is what those bad boys look like up close in case you're curious. And something else I want to show off is that the edges of the map do just sort of fall off. So beyond the fences, beyond the constraints in which the player will normally play in, it's like any other typical game. The geometry for the map ends, and if somehow you were out here and you fell off, there is a failsafe in place that puts you back on the last piece of ground that you touched. This is something else that's pretty common in a lot of games. So now we're going to slow things down a bit and show you a survivor going inside of one of these closets. And as they open the door with a bullet time effect in place, we can see in slow motion how they actually enter this closet area and then close it behind them. And once they're inside, we can see that the survivor actually closes their eyes while they're in here. So the model does stay fully loaded. So after a match ends, our character typically starts running away, and the results screen for the desktop version of the game has a character running alongside your results, where the mobile transitions from your character running to a full screen result window. Now, I was always curious how this running results screen was pulled off, and by moving the camera around, we can of course see things that we normally cannot see. So for one, land generates in front of the player and despawns behind them. So as you can see, we can see chunks of land appearing in front of us, and alongside this, if we leave our camera sit idle for a while, the land beneath us will disappear. Now, there is a seamless loop happening with this character running and the land generating, and the center of the world is actually sort of parented, from what I can tell, to the characters running. That way, even though they're running forever, there will never be any loss of quality on the character model. For example, if I sped this up and I waited here for a very long time, if the character was actually moving away from the origin point for the world, well, then their model would shake apart, eventually losing the precision in its position. However, by making this loop and having this be the center of the world constantly moving, we will never have that happen. So this is a very smart way to ensure a player can stay on the screen as long as they want. So in case you're curious what a killer looks like in slow motion when he's capturing and putting a survivor on a hook, this is what that looks like. So here we have the killer opening the locker ever so slowly, and we can see our survivor inside freaking out because this hulk of a man is barging in here. And then the survivor is thrown over the shoulder in bullet time and then brought over to the hook. And then we can see in all its glory a survivor being put on the sacrificial hook. And of course, we can also view a survivor being pulled off the hook in slow motion to see what that looks like. Now, of course, a survivor has two outcomes. They either escape or they die. So let's take a look at both of those. So in a match where a survivor is the only one left, a hatch will appear on the map, and our player is capable of jumping down this hatch, and this is what that looks like when they actually jump down. So our character reaches the bottom and they sort of just hang here. Now, of course, there's no point in animating anything beyond this because the game ends at this point, but I thought I'd show it off. And on the opposite side, if a player is left dangling on a hook, well, the entity comes down and sacrifices them completely. And watching this in slow motion is actually very cool. You can see the character basically disintegrating and turning into this smoky model of their former selves, and then they get lifted up into the sky. And up there, there's this massive foggy gray cloud, and once they reach the center of that mass, they then unload inside of it and the cloud dissipates. Now, the tutorial sections for Dead by Daylight Mobile and the original Dead by Daylight on PC have of course changed over the years, with the mobile tutorial being more specific to mobile controls and the original tutorial becoming more robust and polished in a way that leaves the player feeling like they understand a lot more about the game. And something I wanted to show off was that in these tutorials, there's usually another survivor and a killer. And when these characters are not in use, they're actually stored in a separate area so that they can be called upon instantly when they need to act. This ensures that no further loading time needs to take place, and they can instantly spawn in when they're needed. And with that brings us to the end of our Dead by Daylight adventure. I once again want to thank Dead by Daylight Mobile for reaching out and wanting to partner with the channel. Being able to take Dead by Daylight Mobile with you wherever you go is quite a lot of fun, and I had a blast playing it and hunting down various survivors and outwitting many killers. It's very easy to assemble a team to play online with random players or your friends, so I highly recommend checking it out. Click the link in the description below to start playing right now on iOS and Android. And once again, a big thank you to Dead by Daylight Mobile for sponsoring this video and supporting me as a creator. Thanks for watching, everyone, and cheers.